Right. So this time we're going to be doing verse 18 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. Verse 17 and 18, they're two parallel verses. In verse 17, Bhagavan said, for those who do not know themselves and for those who have known themselves, the body is actually I. For those who do not know themselves, I is only the extent of the body. For those who have known themselves within the body, oneself, I, shines without limit. Consider that the difference between them is only this. As I explained last time, in this verse, Bhagavan, in the previous verse, he had asked, Nam Udambo, are we the body? And here, the obvious implication there was, no, we are not the body. But here he begins this verse by saying that not only for the ignorant people, the ajnanis, the egos, not only for the ego is the body actually I, even for the jnani, the body is actually I. This seems to go against all his other teachings, but he is saying this for a reason, which he clarifies in the next two sentences. For those who do not know themselves, in other words, for the ego, I is only the extent of the body. That is, I is just limited to this finite body. Whereas for those who have known themselves within the body, I shines without limit. That is, for the ego, the body alone is I. Whereas for the jnani, the body is also I. Because there's, in the experience of the jnani, what actually exists is only Atmaswarupa, only our real nature, that alone exists. And the jnani is nothing other than that. So in the view of our real nature, nothing other than itself exists. But if what we see, what we, the ego, see as this body and as this world, is what our real nature sees as itself. In fact, our real nature sees only itself. To say that our real nature sees all these, or the jnani sees all these things as itself, is like saying seeing a snake as a rope. There's actually no snake there at all. All that is there is a rope. So when what is metaphorically called seeing the rope as a rope is actually just seeing the rope as a rope. There's no snake there at all. Likewise, for the jnani, nothing other than I exists. If at all there's such a thing as body, that body cannot be other than I, so that is also I. So he says, I shines without limit. In the same way, he's saying a parallel truth in this verse 18. He's talking here about the world and saying the world is real. But the sense in which it is real, he clarifies. What he says here in the first sentence, he says, ulahu uṇmai āhum, muṇarvillārk, ulahu. That means ulahu uṇmai āhum, the world is real. Muṇarvillārk means for those who do not have uṇarvu. Uṇarvu here means self-knowledge, awareness. It means true self-knowledge. So for those who do not have true self-knowledge, the world is real. Uḷḷārkku, for those who have, implying for those who have knowledge. So both for the ajnani and for the jnani, the world is real. The knowledge he's referring, what he refers to here as uṇarvu, the knowledge, is obviously knowledge of our real nature. So whether we have knowledge of our real nature or not, the world is real. But in what sense it is real, he clarifies in later sentences. In the Kalivemba version, Bhagavan extended this first sentence by adding before the first word is ulahu, which means the world. Before this first word, he added a relative clause, because in Tamil, relative clauses always come before the noun which they describe. So the relative clause he added was munam, which literally means which is in front, and which implies which is seen in front. It seems to us that the world is there in front of us. We are the perceiver, the world is perceived. It's presented in front of us, as it were. That's obviously metaphorical. So with this relative clause, the first sentence means Munnam ulahu uṇmai āhum, uṇarvu illārkku ulahu. For those who do not have knowledge, and for those who have knowledge, the world which is in front is real. In many of the verses, the words that Bhagavan added to link all the words together to form the Kalivemba version, a lot of the words have very deep or significant meaning. In this particular case, it doesn't have any great significance, but it served to link the verses together, which made it easier for people to remember in order to recite. So in the next two sentences, Bhagavan explains the difference between the jnani and the ajnani in terms of their experience of the world. In the second sentence, he says, ulahu, aļavu, uṇmai, uḷḷārkku. Sorry, uṇarvvu. So for those who do not know, reality, uṇmai, is the extent of the world. That is, in other words, reality is limited to the world. There's no reality beyond the world. This, what seems most real of all, in our extroverted view, our outward-looking view, this world seems real, and it deludes us to such an extent. Nowadays, for example, many philosophers and neuroscientists and others, they have concluded, because they have difficulty, because they believe so much in the reality of the material world, they think that is the basic reality. And how then to explain consciousness, awareness? It's very difficult to explain in terms of material science. But they have a way of doing so. They say it's an emergent property. As systems become more complex, properties emerge which aren't there in simpler forms. So when chemicals combine together to form organic chemicals, and organic chemicals combine together to form living organisms, life is an emergent property. Well, life is not there in the, if you break down the elements, I mean, I'm talking now from a purely physical point of view. If you break down the elements, the chemical elements, for example, that make up our body, there's no life in any of those elements, but combined together, they make a living body. And this, a body with life has certain properties, but a body without life doesn't have. So we all recognize the difference between a living body and a dead body. There's certain qualities that a living body has that a dead body doesn't have. So they say life is an emergent property. In the same way, because of the great complexity of our brains, consciousness has emerged has manifested as an emergent property. That is the scientific explanation of the world, of consciousness. But it doesn't actually explain anything, because why should consciousness manifest? If everything is, if what is real is only material, what is the need for consciousness? our bodies could function just like machines, like a computer, responding to stimuli. There's no need for consciousness. So their explanation is not actually a very good one. But the biggest problem with their explanation is it is putting the perceived before the perceiver. Why we say the world exists? Because we see it. So if there wasn't awareness of the world, we would have no reason to suppose that the world exists. Therefore, epistemically, that is experientially, what comes first? Awareness or the object that we're aware of? Obviously awareness. So, but why I mention this now is because we take the body as I, what is actually real is only I, only ourself, our real nature. That alone is real. But we now experience this body as I. Because we experience this body as I, we therefore we therefore experience it as real. And because this body is part of this world, we experience the whole world as real. This body can't be real and the rest of the world unreal. And if the body is I, since I is real, experiencing the body as I is in effect superimposing our own reality onto the body, and thus onto the world. So when we rise as this ego and experience the body as I, the world seems to be real, not only in this state but also in dream. When we dream, so long as we're dreaming, the body and world that we're experiencing seem to us to be very real, because we take that dream body to be I. That dream body is part of the dream world. So since the dream body is I, it is real. And since the body is real, the whole world is real. So the world seems so real, but in the view, because of our ignorance, reality is limited to the extent of the world, which is what Bhagavan is saying here. It's limited to the extent of the world to such an extent that we think the world is more real than awareness by which we perceive the world. So such is the depth of our ignorance. But that is the nature. This is the nature of Maya. But in the next sentence, he then says, in what sense the world is real for the jnani. Ulahiṉukku, ādhāram-āy, uļļadu, ārum, uṇarndār, uṇmai. That uṇarndār means, well, literally means those who have known, but it implies for those who have known. For those who have known, reality, uṇmai, pervades ārum, uļļadu. Uļļadu means devoid of form. It pervades devoid of form as the ādhāra for the world. Ādhāra means, it's often translated in English as support, but it actually has a broader meaning than just a support. Ādhāra means a support or foundation. It also means a container. So the ādhāra for water is a bottle. If we didn't have a bottle to support it, the water we carry with us in a plastic bottle in the hot sun. If a bottle dissolved, the water would go everywhere. So the contents of a container are supported by the container. So that ādhāra means both a container and a support. So in both senses, the reality is the ādhāra for the world. It's what supports the appearance of the world, both in the sense of like the base of a foundation of a building, supports the building, and it also supports the world in the sense that the whole world is contained within it. But one very important thing he says, the uṇmai, reality, shines uluvaṭru. Uluvaṭru means devoid of form. Without form, it shines. What we see as the world is all these forms, these phenomena. What the jnani sees as the world is the substance of these phenomena. In other words, our seeing the world is our seeing the world as when we see the world, we are seeing the reality as names and forms. That is like seeing the snake as the rope as a snake. What actually is there is only a rope, but we see it as a snake. What the jnani sees, he doesn't see it as a snake, he sees it only as a rope. But metaphorically, metaphorically, Bhagavan says in this verse, the jnani sees the snake as real. In what sense is the snake real? The snake is not real as a snake, it's real as a rope. So in what sense is this world real? It is not real as all these names and forms, it's real as the formless substratum. The formless substratum is just awareness, our real nature. So that's what Bhagavan is talking here as uṇmai. Uṇmai is actually, it's a word used very, very commonly in Tamil to mean reality or truth. But it has an interesting etymology. It's actually, it's formed of a word and a suffix. The word it's formed of is ul, and the suffix is mai. Mai is a suffix that is more or less equivalent to ness in English. Like if we say the tallness, shortness, hopelessness. We use so many words we form using this, using the suffix ness in English, which means the quality of being. Tallness means the quality of being tall. Hopelessness means the quality of being hopeless. So also uṇmai means the quality of ul. Ul means existence. So uṇmai more or less means isness, or since what actually exists is only Atma-swarupa, as Bhagavan says in the first sentence of the 7th paragraph of Nanya, Yathārthamai uḷḷadu Atma-swarupam. What actually exists is only Atma-swarupa. There, what the word he uses for what exists is uḷḷadu, which is the same root ul, from which this word uṇmai is formed. So uṇmai means the isness or amness, because what actually exists is only oneself, the first person. So it's more than isness, we can translate it as amness. So that is what is real. Oh yes, so this is the key sentence in this verse, because here Bhagavan is, though he seemed to say in the first sentence that for jnani the world is real, in this sentence he makes clear that what he means by that is not that the names and forms of the world are real, but that the substance that appears as those names, what appears as those names and forms is real. He makes this clear by this term uruvaṭru. The reality shines devoid of form. So it is worth comparing this sentence with the equivalent sentence, the third sentence in the previous verse. there, after saying that for Vijnani and Ajnani, the body is I, in the third sentence of that verse, he says, uڵḷadu Nāṛpadu, illārkku tan ārum. That means, for those who have known themselves within the body, oneself, I, shines without limit. What he means here by within the body, it's only within the body, but we do our spiritual practice, our self-investigation. So now, because we seem to be this ego, this I that's limited to the body, within this body, it seems to us that, for instance, if we sit down and we want to practice self-investigation, we close our eyes and we try to attend to ourselves, we still seem to be within the body. So metaphorically, it's said, for those who have known themselves within the body, like Bhagavan was, the young boy Venkataraman was within a body when that fear of death came to him. Because he took that body to be I, he was overwhelmed by this fear of death, and he wanted to see whether, when the body dies, will I also die? So he investigated himself. That investigation went on seemingly within the body. And so seemingly within the body, he experienced himself as he really is. But once he experienced himself as he really is, he saw that he alone exists. There was never any body or world. But so we have to understand when Bhagavan sometimes uses very simple ways of saying things, but often he's talking metaphorically. We don't have to take it, we shouldn't take everything he says as literally true. We have to understand the spirit in which he says it. So for those who have known themselves within the body, oneself, I, shines without limit. For the Ajnani, the body, I is limited to the body. For the Jnani, I is the unlimited whole, other than which there can be no body or world. So everything is, for the Jnani, the only thing that exists is Atmasvarupa. And if anything else seems to exist, it cannot be other than Atmasvarupa, which is I. So just like in that verse, he explained that I is actually without limit. In this verse, he explained that the reality is without form. These two verses are very, very interesting, but they're very illustrative of a very nuanced way Bhagavan expressed his teachings. Sometimes, if viewed superficially, it seems Bhagavan is saying one thing, whereas what he's actually saying is quite the opposite. So from the first sentence of these two verses, it seems Bhagavan is saying the body is I, the world is real. But actually the point he is making is the body is I only in the sense of it is nothing other than I, because only I exists. The world is real because what we see as the world of names and forms is actually the one real substance, which is pure awareness. That alone is real. And then in the next sentence he says, āhum bhēdamivark. This is the difference between them. And then in the last sentence he says n, which means consider, which is it's an imperative verb. Sorry, it's an imperative form of a verb that means to think or consider. So it means consider thus. And in the Kalivemba version, Bhagavan extended it as enuha, which is means exactly the same, except it's rather than being just a simple imperative, it's an optative or polite imperative. So it means something like, may you think, or may you consider. Or may you consider this as the difference between them. So I think I've explained that verse enough, unless anyone has any particular questions to ask about it. or about anything else?
I have a question, Michael. This
Yes.
is Steve. Well, this is I am for right now. It dawned on me when you were talking about when we're doing the self-attention.
Yes.
Yeah, we're still within the body. And I thought that was really great because I kind of got a light bulb moment then.
Yes, yes.
And I can see in what you said about Bhagavan when he had his near-death experience, how he could distinguish the two.
Yeah.
And that has really got my curiosity up, like looking for that opportunity for me to distinguish the two. Because I'm really locked into my body, like when I close my eyes and listen and think, go through my thoughts and just observe. I'm observing my body. And that was good. That was really good for me to see that.
You are no exception. We are all locked inside our body. When we rise as ego, we cannot rise as ego without projecting and experiencing a body as I. In a dream, we are engaged in we see so many things, we do so many things, but we're doing them all from a perspective of a body. We experience ourselves as a body in a dream, but that body is just our mental projection. Likewise, though this body is just our mental projection, for us it is I. It's very, very much I. So, and who is doing the self-investigation? It's only the ego. So it's only when we experience ourselves as I am this body that there's any necessity to do self-investigation. We need not, and we cannot do self-investigation when we're asleep, because there's no ego there to do the self-investigation. Therefore, there's no need to do self-investigation. So we can only investigate ourselves in waking and dream. And in waking and dream, we always experience ourselves as a body. But the whole purpose of self-investigation, we are, as you say, we are trying to distinguish. We are trying, now our experience is, I am this body is I. These two seem to us to be indistinguishable. I'm sitting here, I'm talking, I'm listening. All these things, we're constantly, all our language and our thoughts is constantly referring to body as I, because it's actually our experience. This body is I. It's such it's the basis of everything else. Why the world seems to be real? Because the body seems to be I. So it's this Dehatma Buddhi, this awareness, I am this body, is so real and so solid, so long as we rise as ego. So, but when we're investigating ourselves, what we're trying to do is to distinguish ourselves from the body. We are the perceiver. The body is an object perceived. We're the perceiving subject. Body is an object perceived by us. So we need to distinguish the perceiver from the perceived. Whatever is perceived cannot be the perceiver. So that is why another term that is used in Sanskrit to describe the practice of Atma-vichara is drik drisya viveka. Drik means the perceiver, the seer. Drisya means what is seen or what is perceived. Viveka means distinguishing. So the whole purpose of when we are practicing self-investigation, what we are trying to do is to isolate I, and thereby to distinguish it from body. Now they're mixed together. If a scientist wants to find out if there's a herb which is found to have some medicinal properties, for example, the scientists want to find out what is it in this herb that has that medicinal property? What is it in this herb that is effective against cancer or whatever it may be, or against blood clotting or against coronary or so many other diseases. There's something in this herb that is having that beneficial effect. So they try to isolate that, what they call the active ingredient. So it's, when a herb is a mixture of so many different types of chemicals, so how to know which of those chemicals is beneficial? So they try to isolate the chemicals and test them in isolation. So in order to observe and understand the nature of anything, we need to isolate it. In other types of scientific or social scientific experiments, they try to reduce the variables. If you've got many variables, you can't tell which variable is causing which effect. So you need to try and create a system where there's only one variable, and then you can test what is the effect of that variable. So constantly in science, they're trying to isolate in order to study something. In exactly the same way, to study ourselves, to investigate ourselves, we need to isolate ourselves. Because then only now we experience the body as I. But with a little bit of reasoning, we can understand that this body cannot be I. Because if I were actually this body, I couldn't experience myself without experiencing this body. But we know very well in dream, we experience so many things, including ourselves, without experiencing this body. In fact, we experience some other body, which then seems to be I. So since we are experiencing ourselves in dream without experiencing this body, and since we're experiencing ourselves as that body in dream without experiencing ourselves as this body, neither of these bodies can be I. But in both these states, we experience ourselves as more or less the same mind. So is this mind what I actually am? No, because in sleep, there's no mind, but we are still aware I slept. So by reasoning, by logic, we can understand, we can distinguish I from these phenomena. I is not anything but appears and disappears, because we experience I constantly. Everything else appears and disappears. So by simple logic, we can understand this, but that doesn't solve our problem, because in spite of all our logic, we still seem to be this body and still seem to be this mind. So we need to actually experientially distinguish. That experiential distinguishing is done by self-attentiveness. The more we focus our attention on ourselves, the more other things are excluded from our awareness. Supposing you're reading a very interesting book or watching a very interesting film, you don't really notice other things that are going on around you. That someone may be making a noise, or your leg may have become numb, but you don't notice all these things because your attention is so much on that book or on that film. In the same way, the more we focus on anything, the more other things are excluded from our awareness. So we try to focus our attention on ourself alone in order to exclude other things from our awareness. And thereby, in our awareness, we are isolating ourself alone. None of us have been able to do this perfectly yet, but this is the direction in which we are moving, so to speak, when we are practicing self-investigation. So self-investigation is a process of distinguishing ourselves from everything else by trying to isolate ourselves, to be aware of ourself alone.
Thank you.
Michael, I have a question.
Yes.
My husband was just diagnosed with cancer, and
Yes.
that brought up the question for me about balance between focusing on the body and maintaining it, or just the understanding that the body is in the self. So if we just focus on self-awareness, the body will be taken care of. What do you have to say about that?
Well, all that happens in our life happens according to destiny. So if it is our destiny to have cancer, or if it is our destiny to have loved ones who experience cancer, that cannot be changed. And the outcome, then we go for the cancer being diagnosed, we go for treatment and all these things. This is all according to destiny. And many people, their cancer is diagnosed, they go and they have chemotherapy, or they have surgery, or they have radiotherapy, or this or that. In many cases, there's a cure, or at least a partial remission, and they may go on living for many years. In many cases, it doesn't work. All this is according to prarabdha. We cannot change this, but it doesn't mean we can't change it, so don't take treatment, because the treatment is also according to prarabdha. So we have to go with the flow of events. But in the midst of all of experiencing prarabdha, we are having, prarabdha is what determines what we are to experience. But our will determines what we want to experience or don't want to experience. There are many things that we're destined to experience that we want to experience. So we happily enjoy those things. But there are many things that we don't want to experience. So we try to avoid those things. But however much we try to experience things or to avoid experiencing things, we cannot experience anything that we're not destined to experience, and we can't avoid experiencing what we are destined to experience. But our will is playing its part in, our will isn't changing anything, but it's changing our experience of things. Because if we're constantly hankering for what we're not destined to experience, we'll be dissatisfied. So more than the outward events of our life, more than anything that happens to us, what shapes our experience of life is our own will. Are we ready to accept these things, to surrender ourselves, or are we constantly going to be pushing against them, trying to assert our will? However much we try to assert our will, we can't actually change anything. So the wisest course, as Bhagavan says, is to surrender. The train is anyway carrying the burden. Why to carry our little luggage on our head? The train is carrying such a big heavy load. What difference does it make to the train whether our luggage is on our head or on the train? The luggage is going to reach the destination anyway, so let's put the luggage on the luggage rack or wherever, sit back happily and relax. So life throws all sorts of pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences. Nobody wants to have cancer. Nobody wants their loved ones to have cancer. But these things happen. So are we going to, whatever has to be done will be, in terms of treatment and doctors and all these things, that will anyway be done. But are we, in the midst of all these things, while undergoing all these experiences, are we going to be inwardly fighting against it, or are we going to resign ourselves to it, to accept it as the sweet will of Bhagavan for our own spiritual good? So that is the important thing. The whole of our life, the whole of all spiritual practice is a battle. What is the battleground where that battle is fought? The battleground is our will. We have some desires, fears, hopes, expectations that draw our mind outwards. But by divine grace, we also have now had some opposite likes. We like to surrender ourselves. We like to turn within. We like to know the truth. So these the vasana, all these likes are what I call vasanas, propensities. We've got some Vishaya vasanas are what drag our mind to go outwards. Sat vasana is what draws us to go within, to surrender ourselves. So these different vasanas, different elements of our will, are constantly fighting with one another. This is going on throughout our life. So people think, oh, this self-inquiry this self-investigation is very difficult. I will just surrender myself. They think self-surrender is easy, but if anyone has really tried to surrender themselves, they will know how difficult it is. It's easy to surrender ourselves when life is favorable. Oh, I accept all that happens. But when life isn't always favorable, all sorts of things happen that we don't want to happen. That is when our surrender is really put to the test. Not only is our surrender, Bhagavan doesn't need to test our surrender. He's not testing to try and find out how much we surrendered. Bhagavan gives us these opportunities in order for us to practice surrender. So unfavorable circumstances make it very favorable for us to put what we've learned into practice.
Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you. Elaborating a bit more on the strangest question, whatever is predetermined is within our dream, right?
Sorry, I didn't catch that clearly.
Let me move forward a little bit.
Yes.
Whatever is predetermined,
yes,
it is within our dream.
Yes.
As long as we are awake, really awake, then this predestination doesn't exist. So my feeling is that strangest question had to do with what's happening within the dreams, not with the real self. Now, once we awake, then those restrictions, those constraints go away. So my feeling is you should be able to reconstruct your dream and dream it a bit better. Will it be like a possibility? I don't know if I'm making sense. I'm just looking for a way out, basically. I'm not, honestly.
Out of the box thinking. Out of the box thinking.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Better dreams than bird.
What is a dream? A dream is a mixture of pleasant experiences and unpleasant experiences, isn't it?
Okay.
So when we know it's a mixture, why should we want to reconstruct it? Even if we tried to make it all pleasant, but whatever pleasure we may experience in a dream, and by dream I'm including this seeming waking life that we have now, whatever pleasures we may experience in this life, supposing we are born in a wealthy family, we've got very loving relatives, we've got a nice personality, so we like people and people like us, and everything is favorable. We've got nice, a dream life, let's say. The life that we would all like to live, but none of us actually live in practice. But supposing such a life were available, would we be satisfied?
Yeah.
We would not be satisfied. We cannot be satisfied because our very nature as an ego is dissatisfaction. Dissatisfaction is what is referred to in Indian philosophy as dukkha. Dukkha is often translated as suffering because dissatisfaction is suffering. All dissatisfaction is suffering. And dissatisfaction is the very nature of the ego. Why? Because our real nature is infinite happiness. When we rise as this ego, we limit ourselves. So whatever happiness we can experience as this ego is only limited happiness. And along with the limited happiness, there's also unhappiness. With pleasure comes pain. So however favorable and pleasant a life we may have, we will not be satisfied with it. We'll want something more. If we have $1 billion, we'll want $10 billion. If we have 10 nice friends, we want 100 nice friends. Nothing in this world can ever satisfy us. Bhagavan said, Mugana has recorded in Guru Vachakakavai, but Bhagavan said, the nature of desire is that before the desired object is, it will make the desired object, it will make even a molehill, Mount Meru, that will make a small thing very big before it's attained, and after it's attained, even a very big thing will seem to be a very small thing. And Bhagavan said, therefore, there's no bottomless pit that is so impossible to fill as desire. However much we try to satisfy our desires, we can never be satisfied. So, however pleasant our dream may be, it's not going to satisfy us. So there's no dream that would be worth reconstructing. The best thing is to wake up and stop dreaming. Because when we wake up, we will experience ourselves as infinite happiness. What more than that could we want? There can be no dissatisfaction in the state where we are infinite happiness, and where there's nothing other than infinite happiness exists.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you very much. That's very clear. I agree. Thank you.
Hi, Michael.
So Sadhu often used to say, don't give up desire. Have more and more desire. Have desire for the infinite. Rather than having all these petty desires that we have. These are very small and insignificant desires. Have that desire for what is infinite. That desire for what is infinite is what is called bhakti.
So you want to be greedy.
He also used to say, when people said how to give up desire, he said, don't even try to give up desire. It's impossible to give up desire. Desire is your very nature. But realize that the real nature of desire, what manifests in us as small desires for this or that, that's all a distorted reflection of our real nature, which is infinite love. So find out what you are, and then your desire will be, you will love nothing less than the infinite whole. Desire nothing less than that.
Go ahead, Ravi.
Michael, you have used the term before called Chit Jara Granthi.
Yes.
Jara is this body, sentient, limited in time space. And Chit is this eternal, limitless, infinite. And so in order to have this Granthi, it must be with a self-limiting form. How is it possible to have this undifferentiated, indivisible, blissful isness pairing up with this limited, miserable body?
That cannot be answered. When people ask Bhagavan, how did Maya come into existence? How did the ego rise? How did Bhagavan said, first find out whether it's actually come into existence, and then ask me to explain it. If we investigate this, Chit-Jada Granthi is a description of the ego. Chit-Jada Granthi is the ego. So the ego is formed of what? It's got an element of awareness, and it's got an element of jada, of non-awareness. As you say, the non-aware element is the body. And the body means, according to Bhagavan, body is not just this physical body. This body is one of the 5 elements one of the 5 sheaths that constitute body. Others are, when we experience body as I, we never experience a dead body as I, do we? It's always a living body we experience as I. So we're experiencing not only the physical form, we're also experiencing the life, the prana as I. And we never experience a sleeping body as I. It's always an awake body. So there's mind, intellect, will, all these things are there. So all these 5 things together, the physical form, the life, the mind, that's the thinking and everything, the intellect, the discriminating power, and the most basic of all the sheaths, the will, which is also called the darkness of self-ignorance, all these constitute the body. These, according to Bhagavan, all of these 5 are jada. The subtlest of all of them is the will. But who is it who desires? Desires don't have any, a desire isn't aware of its own existence. The one who has desire is the ego. So it's I want, I like, I dislike, I fear, I desire. So the will belongs to the ego. Who is discriminating? Who is using the intellect? Who is judging what is right and what is wrong, what is good, what is bad, what is real, what is unreal? It is I, the ego. So all these 5 sheaths are instruments used by the ego. They are all jada. The ego catches this 5-sheathed form and takes it as itself. So this 5-sheath form is the jada element. The awareness is the chit element. But the ego isn't either this or that. The ego isn't pure awareness, and it isn't these 5 sheaths. But it is a combination. If you have 2 long pieces of string and you wind them together and twist them and everything, you end up with a ball, with a knotted ball. You cannot distinguish one thread from the other. They're so intertwined, they seem to be one. That is the nature of the ego. We are unable to distinguish the awareness from the body. We think the body is aware, or the mind is aware. The body isn't aware, the mind isn't aware. I am aware. I am aware of the body, I'm aware of the mind, I'm aware of the thoughts. But I'm not only aware of the body and mind, I'm aware of them as I. So whereas I experience other things, now there's a PC in front of me. That I experience as not I, it's other than I. I can get up and walk away. So it's not I. But this body, this is I. That is the delusion we are all under, and that is the nature of Maya. So this Chit Jada Granti, it is, well, as I say, the term is a description of the ego, of the nature of the ego. It is such a tight knot, and the only way to cut through it is by self-investigation, by trying to isolate the awareness element from the jada element, by trying to focus all our attention, all our awareness on awareness itself.
Any questions?
Hi, Michael. This is Kathy.
Yes.
You talked about Arabda.
Yes.
And I just read about that. One of the books I got from here. Number one, I'm trying to figure out how to stop racking it up.
Yeah.
You know. And number two, because of past stuff, will it keep me from becoming aware or not I don't want to come back again.
Right. Okay. Right.
So Robert
right.
keep me coming back until I.
Yeah. Right. Right. Okay. Prarabdha means fate or destiny. It is according to Bhagavan, that is what we are destined to experience in this lifetime. We have to experience. All that we experience is the fruit of actions that we've done in the past. But there's so many actions we've done in the past. By our actions there means actions we've done with our own volition. So there's so many actions that we've done with our own volition in the past, but we haven't yet experienced the fruit of. So there's a huge store of fruits waiting to be experienced. That store is called sanchita. From that sanchita, the power of grace, you can call it God, Guru, grace, whatever, selects certain fruit for us to experience in each life. And the fruit itself, it selects the fruit in such a way that will be most conducive to our progress in our spiritual development. So that is whatever is has been allotted to us as our prarabdha in this lifetime is for our benefit. And we cannot change it. We cannot experience anything that we are not destined to experience, and we cannot avoid experiencing anything that we are destined to experience, so long as our attention is going outwards. Bhagavan often used to say, prarabdha affects only the outward going mind, not the inward going mind. Because prarabdha is the fruit of past karmas. It's pleasure, it's experiences, pleasures, pains, and neutral experiences. It's only when we are looking outwards that we experience that. Supposing you're experiencing some pain. If you're able to withdraw your mind from that pain and fix it on yourself, or just think about Bhagavan, or think about God, whatever, if you're able to draw your attention away from that pain onto something that you love, you will not even notice the pain. The pain is there according to your destiny, but you are free to withdraw your mind from it. The best thing to focus our mind on, focus our attention on, is ourself. Because anything else, anything other than ourselves is also something outside. So instead of thinking of the pain, we can think of God, for example. Taking God to be something other than ourselves. But if God is something other than ourselves, he's a limited God. If God is an unlimited God, if he's infinite, we cannot be other than him. So the real nature of God is actually our own real self. What we actually are is God. So when we understand that, the best way to think of God is to attend to ourselves, because God is always shining in us directly as our nearest and dearest, as our own self. So the best thing to meditate on, to focus our attention on, is ourself. And to the extent that we focus our attention on ourselves, our mind is withdrawn from everything else, so we don't experience that prarabdha. But prarabdha will go on, as it's destined to go on. But because our mind is withdrawn from it, it doesn't affect us. So it's up to us whether we allow ourselves to be affected by our destiny or not.
That feels a lot better, thank you.
Yeah, that freedom we have. We don't have the freedom to change what we're destined to experience. We have freedom to want to change it. We have freedom to try to change it. We don't have any freedom to change it. But we do have freedom to attend to it or not to attend to it. If we attend to it, we have to experience its pleasures and pains. If we don't attend to it, we'll be unaffected by it. How to avoid attending to it? By turning our attention within and by surrendering ourselves. Even when our mind goes outwards, we can accept this. This is all given by Bhagavan for my own good. Because Bhagavan wants to give me that infinite happiness. Sometimes he gives me a little bit of pain in order to keep me searching for that infinite happiness that is always in my heart. So whatever pleasures or pains are given to us to experience in this lifetime are given for our own good.
Michael?
Yes?
So, yeah, good?
No, yeah, good.
Okay. Go ahead.
Michael, currently I'm doing some exercises very painful exercises for a temporary ailment. And I have not tried to take my mind off when I'm in that position. But if anything, my attachment to my body and Chit-Jara Granthi gets stronger compared to when I sit in self-attention.
Yes.
In ordinary. So that's number one. And the other thing is this Vishaya Vashana or whatever that generates karma continually, that doesn't seem to be of my own volition. I don't always think that it's my volition.
Right, okay.
Perpetuating misery.
Right, right. Well, the thing is, all vasanas are elements of our will. The problem is we want many things and we want many contradictory things.
Mm-hmm.
I have a desire to enjoy some pleasure, but I know that desire is not ever going to, and this desire can never be satisfied. So I want to be free of that desire. So I have a desire and I want to be free of it. So there are two elements of my will. There's one element of my will is that desire. The other element of my will is that wish to be free of that desire. These are in conflict with one another. Or it may be a fear. I may have a fear of something. Who wants to have a fear? We want to be free of fear. But fears can sometimes be, just like desires, fears can be very, very powerful. So though we want to be free of them, we're unable to be free of them. Why? Because that desire or that fear is stronger than our liking to be free of it. So it seems it's against our will that these vasanas are rising. But these vasanas are our will. They're elements of our will. They seem to be against our will because we would prefer to be without them. But we don't, our preference to be without them is not yet strong enough. That's why I said earlier, the whole of the spiritual path is a battle fought on the battleground of our will. Bhagavan, in one verse in Guru Vachakavai, Bhagavan compares, you know, in Puranas and Ityasas, the mythological stories and epics of India, they're all about battle between good and evil, between devas and asuras. Bhagavan said, what that battle is going on in all of us all the time. The love we have to turn within and to surrender ourselves, that is the devas. The desires we have to go outwards and seek happiness in the external world, they are the asuras.
Thank you.
But it may seem, we may seem to be helpless because we've got so many, as Bhagavan says in Nanya, Tondru Totu Varukindra, that means which come from time immemorial, these vasanas. So how can we get rid of all these vasanas which have been there with us for countless lives? How to get rid of these? Surely we're helpless because our own desires are pulling our mind outwards. What can we do to stop that? The key is attention. Desires are fed by our attention. If you have a desire to buy the latest model of car, say, you know you can't afford it, but you see other people driving that car, and you think how nice it would be to have that car and to drive it. So you're constantly hankering for that car, and you think, how can I earn enough money to buy that car? So your mind is constantly thinking of that car, and that car becomes a big, big object in your life. So you are feeding that desire by attending to it. If you want to be free of that desire, you have to try and put the thoughts of that car out of your mind as much as possible. Think of other things. Think of other things that there are that will give you pleasure. This car is not the only thing in the world that can make you happy. So find something else. And best of all, rather than finding something else, or better than finding some other material thing to desire, have desire for God. And when you have desire for God, that will slowly, slowly free your mind from other desires and thereby purify your mind. And when your mind is purified, then you understand that God is actually nothing other than your own self. So to meditate on God, to think of God, we have to turn our attention within. So in this way, slowly, slowly, by using our power of attention, by withdrawing it from the worldly things to God, and then by withdrawing it from the God as our conception of God as something outside ourselves, to God who is really God's real nature, which is shining in our heart as I, we are using our attention. Why are we using our attention this way? Because of our will. So our attention is driven by our will, but we are using it as a tool in the hands of the favorable elements of our will, the elements of our will who want to surrender and to investigate ourselves. So in this way, though there are many conflicting elements in our will, we have an ability to weed out the good ones and to cultivate the bad ones. A gardener, when he's gardening, he wants to grow certain plants or vegetables in his garden. But so many weeds will also come. Because he cultivates the ground, it's very attractive for the weeds. So the weeds will also come. So he has to be constantly removing the weeds in order for the plants he wants to grow to grow. That is what we are doing in the spiritual path. We are constantly trying to weed out the bad tendencies and cultivate the good ones. Good ones doesn't mean actually tendencies that prompt us to do so-called good actions. It's better to do good actions than bad actions. But any desire to do any action is bad, because our real nature is not doing but being. So we have to weed out all these vasanas that draw our mind away from ourselves and cultivate them vasanas that draw our mind back to ourselves.
Will there be a definite end to those thoughts? You said that we should not be attending to the external circumstances. I'm paraphrasing what you said.
Yes.
But we should turn inside, which means we are not attending to the thoughts which are coming to our mind. There will be a definite end to the thoughts coming in?
Yes, yes. But that is, the more we turn our attention within, but we are weakening the outgoing tendencies. It's like if you when we don't attend to thoughts which are every thought is the rising of a vasana. If we don't attend to that thought, our attention is like water for a plant. So by attending to thoughts, we are nourishing them. By withdrawing our attention from them and focusing our attention on ourselves, we are depriving them of the attention that they need. That is like depriving seeds of water. Without water, they can't sprout. So we are slowly weakening our outgoing tendencies and strengthening our love to go within. But we cannot, so long as we rise as ego, we can never be completely free of these outgoing desires. Because they're the very nature of the ego. So in order to bring about vasanakshaya, the destruction of all vasanas, we have to bring about the destruction of the root of all vasanas. And what is the root of all vasanas? Whose vasanas are they? They are my vasanas, my desires, my likes, my dislikes, my fears, my hopes, my aspirations, whatever. So the I, whose desires they are, that I is the root of them, that I is the ego. So ultimately we can get rid of all vasanas only by getting rid of the ego.
Bhagavan guarantees
but we need to get rid of egos to a large extent in order to be able to root out the ego. If you have a very, very dense bush and you want to get rid of it, you have to cut the root. But it's such a dense bush, you can't get at the root. You first have to cut a lot of the leaves and branches to make the root accessible. Likewise, we've got to get rid of a lot of our vasanas, or at least weaken our vasanas to a considerable extent, in order to be able to tackle their root, the ego.
The question there is, it seems unrealistic at times that we can weaken the vasanas, but that in itself might be another concretion of the mind itself, is what I'm thinking. Because it seems a little unrealistic that I can weaken the vasanas.
Throughout our life, we're making choices, aren't we? You were born in India. At some point in your life, you made a choice to come to America. There will be so many reasons why you made that choice. Okay, we can say it's prarabdha, but even if it's prarabdha, you weren't forced to come to America. It was you had certain desires to come to America for certain benefits you would gain thereby. But in order to come to America, you have to sacrifice various things. You're not able to be you're not able to see your parents so frequently because they live in India. Listen, so throughout our life, I'm just citing that as an example, but throughout our life, we're making choices. And every choice we make, we are sacrificing something. We're giving up something for the sake of something else. We cannot experience everything. So we have to make choices, whether to experience, okay, there's a football match going on today, and there's also tennis. Do I watch the football match or tennis? I can't watch both together. I have to make a choice, one or the other. So if I have a stronger liking for football than I have for tennis, I'll watch football. But if I think football's there are a lot of violent hooligans who watch football, so I don't want to be associated with violent hooligans. Tennis is a much more calm and peaceful sport, so let me watch tennis instead. Slowly, your interest in football will wane and your interest in tennis will increase. This is the nature of the mind. We're constantly cultivating certain vasanas and getting rid of other vasanas. Though we may not think of it in those terms, but the choices we make have that effect. So when we can do that in relation to ordinary, we can choose one type of Vishaya Vasana over another type of Vishaya Vasana. We cultivate one as opposed to another. Can we not do the same in the spiritual path? Okay, it's relatively easy to, if we like both tennis and football, to decide, okay, I prefer to, I'm going to choose tennis over football. These sort of choices are relatively easy. But the choice to surrender ourselves is the supremely, I mean, that is the ultimate choice we have to make. And that is going against all our other desires. So it is not easy. We have to slowly, slowly work at it, slowly, slowly cultivate that liking to surrender ourselves to Bhagavan, to turn within and yield ourselves wholly to Him. By practice, by practicing this ipati paraka paraka, manatiku, tampirapidatiku, yes, so the liking to, the power to remain firmly in our birthplace, in our source, will increase by practicing and practicing. So Bhagavan has given us that assurance.
Thank you.
And it's not even, what Bhagavan actually asked us to practice, actually it's the simplest of all things. What can be simpler than attending to ourselves? But one thing we are always aware of is ourselves. Instead of attending to other things, let's attend to ourselves. It's so, so easy. It seems difficult because we have such strong liking to attend to other things. But actually what Bhagavan has given is the easiest of all things. To do idol worship, for example, we need temples. Or even if not a temple, we at least need a vigraha of Vinayaka or some whatever other god we want to worship. To do japa, we need a japa mala or something. To do other sadhanas, so many aids are necessary. To do pranayama, we need to be holding our nose or whatever it is. But so many, we need actions of body, speech, and mind to do any other type of sadhana. But to attend to ourselves, we don't need any action of body, any action of mind, any action of speech, just by turning our attention back to ourselves. So this is the simplest of all paths, and it's the one thing we can do anywhere, at any time, in any circumstances. Even if we're in the midst of a battlefield, if we have sufficient love, we can easily attend to ourselves.
Sometimes I feel that the mind is afraid of facing itself inside, so it tries to distract me to go external.
Very, very true. That is what's happening. That is why we all jump out with such enthusiasm, because we know instinctively that by attending to ourselves, that is suicide. The ego seems to exist only so long as we're attending to things other than ourselves. The ego doesn't actually exist at all, but it seems to exist only when we look at other things. If we look at the ego itself, tedinalotum pidicum, it's sought, it takes flight. So the ego doesn't want, so long until we are ready to surrender ourselves, it is not possible to go deep in this practice of self-investigation. We can go deep in this practice to the extent that we are willing to surrender ourselves. Because investigating what this ego is, as Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. So until we are willing to give up everything, our investigation will only be sporadic and relatively superficial. We want to go deep in this path. Bhagavan says, how to dive deep into the ocean to get that atma-muttu, the pearl of self. What do we need to do? We need to tie the stone of vairagya to our waist. Vairagya means the freedom from desire to attend to anything other than ourselves. So we need that, and that will come only with practice. The more we practice this, more our bhakti and vairagya will be strengthened. And the more they're strengthened, the more we'll practice and the deeper we'll go.
Michael?
Thank you.
Yes?
Hi, Michael.
Hi.
I'm wondering, so it all seems to boil down to attention.
Yes.
So attention is a faculty of the intellect or the mind, right?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
so
we can say it's a tool of the ego, actually. Mind in the sense of ego, yes. But I mean, the attention is the tool of the ego, because even the mind, so many thoughts come in the mind. Which thoughts do we attend to? The ego is the one who decides. And the ego decides according to its will.
So what I'm trying to, so the only way I can attend to something is with objective qualities, right? Attention itself implies that it has some sort of something that's tangible, something that it can be known. Whereas when I'm attending to myself, it's the unknown as an object. It's the subject I'm attending to, which is unknown because it doesn't have any perceivable quality.
Yes.
So how will I know when I'm attending to myself?
When you're attending to yourself perfectly, you won't be there to know it.
But when I'm attending to myself imperfectly, I'll know.
So yes. Now the normal state of the mind is going outwards. Because our mind means attention. The normal condition of attention is going outwards towards things other than ourselves. Because we are so interested in experiencing other things, though we are always self-aware, we are negligently self-aware. We overlook our self-awareness. We take it for granted. One used to say this is like when you go to a cinema to watch a film. What you're looking at all the time is the screen. But do you notice the screen? No, because you're too much interested in the pictures. So the screen is our basic self-awareness. None of these pictures could appear except on the screen of self-awareness. But because we are so interested in the pictures, we overlook the screen of self-awareness. So we are generally, though we are always self-aware, throughout the waking and dream state, we're generally negligently self-aware because we're directing our attention to other things. So the self-awareness is always there in the background, but we don't pay heed to it. So what we are trying to do when we practice self-investigation, we are trying to be attentively self-aware. Self-awareness cannot be an object of our attention. So it's very difficult words cannot adequately describe it. We talk about attending to ourself as if ourself was an object, but obviously ourself isn't an object. So rather than, I mean, we use language, but we have to understand what is meant by this. To express it better than attending to oneself, being self-attentive is a better way of describing it. It sounds less objective. Because attending to, you immediately think of attending to some object. We can attend to anything within the field of our awareness. So whatever is potentially in the field of our awareness, we can focus our awareness on any one thing. I can be attending to this computer screen that's in front of me, or I can look at the ceiling, I can look out the window, I can take a book and start reading. There's so many things around me that I can attend to, but I cannot attend to what's happening in Moscow or Beijing or Delhi or something, because I'm not there to attend to it. It's outside the field of my awareness. So we can attend to anything which is potentially within our present field of awareness. The one thing that is constantly within our field of awareness is our own self-awareness, because that is the screen on which all these other phenomena are appearing. So we can always be self-attentive if we want to be. But for many people, it's difficult at first to grasp what exactly being self-attentive is. And people, it's often used to ask the Bhagavan, how to do this? You talk about this self-investigation, but how to do it? Bhagavan used to say, if the way were objective, it could be shown by someone else. But the way is not objective, it's subjective, it's going within. You need to be shown the way inside your own home. You have to go inside, you have to find your own way. So that is why Bhagavan, though sometimes he referred to it as meditation, he sometimes referred to it as Swarupa Dhyana, meditation on one's own nature, or Anyabhava, meditation on what is not other than oneself. He sometimes referred to it as meditation, but generally he referred to it as vichara or natam, investigation. It is because investigation means we're exploring. How to investigate something, you have to investigate it to learn how to investigate it. So the way cannot be shown. Bhagavan has given us lots of clues. Be self-attentive, attend to yourself, turn within, turn away from everything else. All these are clues Bhagavan has given us. But actually to understand what these clues are pointing at, we have to put it into practice. At first, our self-attentiveness will be imperfect, but the more and more we practice, the more perfect it will become.
So in verse 26 of Upadesavandiyar, Bhagavan has this line, Tānā iruttale thanai aridanam.
Yes.
So I think I found that to be very useful.
Yes, yes.
In response to Deepti's question.
Yes. Attending to anything other than ourselves entails a movement of our mind or our attention away from ourselves towards some other thing. But to attend to ourselves, no such movement is necessary. In fact, attending to ourselves, though it doesn't seem like this because of our desire to go outside, attending to ourselves is actually allowing our attention to rest in its source. So it's a state of self-attentiveness is not a doing, it's a being. It's a state of being. And why Bhagavan says that Tanai iritle tanai aridalam, why is being ourself, alone knowing ourself? Because our very nature is self-awareness. So we don't need to do anything to be aware of ourselves. We just need to be ourselves to be aware of ourselves. How to be ourselves? By attending to anything other than ourselves, we rise as ego. So we are always ourselves. There's never a moment when we are not ourselves, but we seem to become ego. We seem to rise as ego. We're not remaining as we actually are. So in order to be as we actually are, we need to withdraw our attention from everything else and attend only to ourselves. By attending to ourselves, we subside back into our Pirapidam, our birthplace, the source from which we rose. That is the correct practice of self-investigation. That's why Bhagavan often said, all that is needed is just to be, But people misunderstand that, and they think they can just be by imagining, okay, I'm sitting, I'm just being, and being still, we can't be still by an act of will. We can't. The only way to be still, the only way to just be, is to attend to ourselves. So long as we allow our attention to move away from ourselves, even to a slightest extent, we are rising and therefore not just being.
But is not the nature of the ocean to rise as the waves? It seems unnatural not to rise, at least from this standpoint.
Yes, the ocean is the mind, an ocean of vasanas. So it's its nature to be constantly rising. But are you that?
No, I need to rebel against it, right?
You are the ādhāra. You are that which contains the ocean, contains all these vasanas. So attend to yourself. Let the ocean take care of itself. If thoughts want to rise, let them rise. What is it to you? They're other than you, so ignore them. That's why Bhagavan says in the end of verse 6 of Arunachashtakam, Nindrida Sendrida Ninevida Vindre. Let them appear or not appear. That in that verse, what he describes is how the internal worlds and external worlds, in other words, the worlds of our so seemingly our mental world and the seemingly physical world, how these are all a projection of our own vasanas. Bhagavan explains that in verse 6. And then at the end he says, Nindrida Sendrida Ninevida Vindre. Let them appear or let them not appear. Let them come to an end or let them continue. Ninevida Vindre, they're not other than you. So what is it that Bhagavan refers to there as you? That is Arunachala. Who is Arunachala? Arunachala is that which is always shining in our heart as I. Arunachala is pure self-awareness. So none of these things that appear or disappear are other than that pure self-awareness. So let them appear or disappear. Let us bother only about our own self-awareness. Bhagavan, why Bhagavan said that, it's a very, very important point. If we are concerned about the appearance of thoughts, our attention will be on that. Oh, I'm getting too many thoughts. How do I get rid of these thoughts? Because of these thoughts, I can't practice self-investigation. These thoughts are my enemy. I've got to somehow get rid of them. If we are concerned about them, we are feeding them. If we're indifferent to them, okay, let them appear or let them not appear. Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nanya, when describing how whenever any thought arises, we should investigate to whom it's arisen. Bhagavan said, what's it matter however many thoughts arise? Thoughts aren't our concern. Let thoughts take care of themselves. We should be attending to ourselves. In other words, we should be so indifferent to thoughts, whether they appear or not is no concern of ours. We should be indifferent to everything other than ourselves. If we are so indifferent to everything, then there will be no appearance of anything. Things appear only because we're concerned about them.
Any other questions? Comments, thoughts? Okay. Now we'll conclude today's session.
Right.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael.
Right. Thank you.